Kelly thinks that Mom is going to hand over everything to her. She even tries to badmouth me, but it's too late. Hello, I'm Truly, and welcome to my channel. For more stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Also, please let me know where you are hearing this from in the comments below. The chipped paint on the porch railing was the same shade of faded blue it had been my entire life. It was a comforting kind of familiar, like Mom's perpetually worried frown or the scent of lavender she always wore. Stepping onto the porch, I could already hear the murmur of voices inside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever drama awaited me. I hadn't planned on visiting today. Work had been a beast, demanding every ounce of my attention, and the thought of collapsing on my couch with a book was incredibly appealing. But Mom had called, her voice a little too high-pitched, a little too breathless. "Just come by if you can, dear," she'd said. "Kelly's here." That was all it took. Kelly's here translated to, prepare for a tornado of entitlement and passive-aggressive digs. I pushed open the front door, the familiar creak echoing through the small living room. Mom sat on the floral sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Kelly, my younger sister, was perched on the edge of the armchair, legs crossed, her perfectly manicured hand waving dismissively in the air. "Honestly, Mom," Kelly was saying, her voice dripping with exasperation, "it's just common sense. Christina doesn't even need the estate. She barely works. I heard from Sarah May that she saw Christina at some store during the day, in the middle of the week. Who does that? She's probably about to be evicted from her apartment." My blood ran cold. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand still on the knob. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall of my sister. Mom's eyes flicked up and she saw me. A flicker of relief, quickly masked by apprehension, crossed her face. "Christina! Darling, you're here?" Kelly didn't even bother to turn around immediately. "Oh, great," she muttered, finally swiveling in her chair, her perfectly glossed lips pursed in a moue of annoyance. "Speak of the... well, you know..." I forced a smile, though every muscle in my body screamed for me to unleash a torrent of well-deserved fury. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Kelly." I walked further into the room, trying to appear nonchalant, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I couldn't let them see how much their words affected me. "Christina, dear, have you eaten?" Mom asked, her voice overly bright. "I made your favorite, that chicken pot pie you like." "That sounds wonderful, Mom, thank you," I said, shooting her a grateful smile. I knew she was trying to diffuse the tension, to create a semblance of normalcy in the face of Kelly's impending storm. Kelly, however, wasn't about to let normalcy prevail. "Anyway, as I was saying, Mom," she continued, turning back to Mom with a theatrical sigh, "it just makes sense. I'm settled down, you know. I'm building my brand, whatever that means, and I'm going to need financial support. Christina clearly doesn't need the family estate. I mean, let's be honest, she's probably just scraping by." I bit my tongue, hard. The family estate Kelly was referring to was the small, somewhat dilapidated house we had grown up in. It wasn't much, but it held a lifetime of memories. Mom, bless her heart, always envisioned leaving it to both of us, a symbol of our shared history. What Kelly didn't know was that the house, along with everything else, was already mine. 2 years ago, Dad had passed away unexpectedly. He hadn't left a will, a fact that had sent Kelly into a frenzy. She had visions of extravagant shopping sprees and a life of leisure, all funded by his meager savings and the eventual sale of the house. Mom, overwhelmed by grief and Kelly's relentless demands, had nearly buckled under the pressure. That's when I stepped in. I hired a lawyer, navigated the complex legal processes, and, with Mom's consent, bought out Kelly's share of everything. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to silence her for a while. I then transferred ownership of the house entirely to myself, with the understanding that Mom would live there for as long as she wanted, without any worries. Kelly had no idea. She saw me as the responsible, predictable older sister, who worked a steady job and lived a quiet life. She couldn't fathom that I was capable of making such decisive moves. She probably thought I was still working at the same marketing firm I'd been at for the past 5 years. She didn't know that I had left that job a year ago to start my own business. A business that was now thriving, exceeding all my expectations. The store Sarah May saw me at? It was the grand opening of my newest boutique, a carefully curated haven of artisan goods and ethically sourced products. The weekday visit was me checking on inventory and making sure everything was perfect. "Kelly, dear, I don't know," Mom said, her voice laced with uncertainty. It just doesn't seem fair to exclude Christina. Fair? Kelly scoffed. Life isn't fair, Mom, and let's be real, Christina has always been different. She's never really needed anything from anyone. She's always been so independent. So why does she need the house? I, on the other hand, I need it. I deserve it. That was it. The simmering anger finally bubbled over. I took a deep breath, pushing down the hurt that threatened to overwhelm me. I wouldn't let her see me crumble. I wouldn't let her win. You know, Kelly, I said, my voice calm and steady, you're right about one thing. Life isn't fair. But you know what else isn't fair? Making assumptions about people's lives without knowing the first thing about them. Kelly's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I walked over to the fireplace mantel, where a framed photo of Dad sat. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the outline of his smiling face. It means, Kelly, that you have absolutely no idea what's going on in my life. You think I'm scraping by, about to be evicted? That I don't work hard? That I don't deserve anything? I turned to face her, my gaze unwavering. Well, let me enlighten you. I set the photo back on the mantel and walked over to the small desk in the corner. I opened the drawer and pulled out a stack of documents. Legal documents. These, Kelly, I said, holding up the stack, are the deeds to this house. All in my name. The color drained from Kelly's face. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. 2 years ago, after Dad passed, I bought out your share of the estate. Remember that check you cashed so eagerly? That was me, ensuring that Mom wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I walked closer, my voice low and steady. And as for my job, or lack thereof, as you so eloquently put it, I own a business, Kelly. A successful business. Several, actually. That store Sarah May saw me at, it was mine. I was there because I was working. I let the documents fall onto the coffee table, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent room. So, before you start making assumptions about my life, Kelly, maybe you should try actually getting to know me. Maybe you should try working for something you want, instead of expecting everything to be handed to you on a silver platter. I turned to Mom, who was watching us with wide, tear-filled eyes. Mom, I did all of this for you. I wanted you to be safe, secure, and happy. And if that means dealing with Kelly's constant demands and unwarranted assumptions, then so be it. I walked over to Mom and knelt beside her, taking her hand in mine. I love you, Mom. She squeezed my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Christina, dear, she whispered. I had no idea. I smiled sadly. I know, Mom, and that's okay. I wanted to protect you from all of this. From Kelly. Kelly finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. You bought the house? I nodded. Yes, Kelly, I did. And I'm not about to hand it over to someone who thinks they deserve it without lifting a finger. She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it shame? Regret? Doubtful. More likely, it was just frustration that her plan had been thwarted. But, what am I supposed to do? She stammered. I stood up, my gaze hardening. That, Kelly, is not my problem. Maybe you should try getting a job. Maybe you should try building something of your own, instead of leeching off of everyone else. I turned to Mom, offering her a reassuring smile. I should get going, Mom. I have a lot of work to do. I hugged her tightly, then turned to leave. As I reached the door, I paused, turning back to face Kelly one last time. Oh, and Kelly, I said, my voice dripping with a sweetness that bordered on sarcasm. Next time you decide to spread false rumors about me, make sure you get your facts straight. You never know who might be listening. I walked out of the house, leaving Kelly speechless and Mom in tears. As I stepped back onto the porch, I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of lavender clinging to the air. It wasn't a victory, not really. It was just a necessary defense, a protection of the woman I loved and the life I had worked so hard to build. The chipped paint on the railing seemed a little less faded now, a little more resilient. Just like me. I knew the drama wasn't over. Kelly would be back, demanding something else, concocting another scheme. But this time, I was ready. I was armed with the truth, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it. As I walked away from the blue house, I knew one thing for sure: the days of being underestimated were over.